Welcome back to another trade video. We will continue to look at the most recently traded players and note if they are a buy or a sell. Let's jump right into it. First off, the most traded player is Justin Jefferson. Now, he is on injured reserve and he is expected back in week 10. The Viking situation where he can be activated may determine just so. Now I'm talking about like that win-loss. So I'm kind of thinking about how the Rams handled Cooper Kupp, just last year. They ended his season early because, it was a lost season basically. However, the Vikings, they are second in the NFC North. They're coming off this huge win against the 49ers, and this may add fuel to this motivation for Jefferson and the team. So kind of depending on all those factors, I would assume if the Vikings are competing, Jefferson's going to be playing, and if they lose out, he may not play. There's a risk versus reward in this buy, but buy Jefferson, he's, the most talented wide receiver, and why would you not want that on your team? Moving on here to the second most traded player, Jerome Ford, another guy who's kind of injured. He suffered an ankle sprain during that last week. However, during that game, Ford posted a run with a speed of 21.13 miles per hour, which is the fastest for the Browns since 2019. The fortunate side for this injury, it's considered a low sprain, which means he's going to come back sooner opposed to when, you suffer a high ankle sprain. He's expected to miss 1 to 2 games. So, I want to look to acquire him, buy him low here if a league mate, especially if they need that immediate fill in at that running back position. Now, it should be noted earlier this week, the Browns, they did waive a running back. This could mean Ford may just miss 1 game or potentially see some game action this week. I will definitely try to see if you can acquire Ford and use a potential 2-week absence to get him. Now, if you are enjoying the video, please drop a like and subscribe to the channel here for more content. Moving on here, Rhamondre Stevenson, third most traded player. Now, despite a lack of rushing production, Stevenson, he has seen 2 straight weeks with 6 targets and has 11 total receptions. So if we can guarantee this consistent receiving production, then yeah, sure, absolutely. I will look into acquire him. An important note is Stevenson, he has seen snaps increase over the last 3 weeks. Albeit, he topped out at 65% this past week. I would like to say you should buy low here. The price is probably right for that reward that you could receive. When we look at Ezekiel Elliott, he has been involved more in the red zone over these last 2 weeks. It's just this major takeaway for Stevenson is this potential pass game usage, which it's going to matter a lot for these PPR leagues. Moving on here to the fourth most traded player, Puka Nacua. Now, last week during this season, it was mentioned to buy Puka following his down game last week. Now, we jump forward to this week, or this past week, and he explodes. He has 154 yards, which is going to make that cost rise naturally following that down 4 reception game. A fun fact here about Puka is his target share has increased since Cooper Kupp has returned. And per fantasy points data, that first read target share, it has only gone down 0.6%. It's going to be hard to acquire him, and you may need to wait for another down week. Just not sure why you should want to sell him, unless you could package for someone like A.J. Brown. Simple and sweet here. Buy if you can, but that price is going to be high. Moving on here to the most traded players, we're looking at T. Higgins. Now, he has seen 2 straight weeks with 51 and 54% snap share. And when we look at those first 3 weeks, he was above 85%. They're coming off a bye, so this gives him a little bit extra rest time with that rib fracture. And this Bengals offense, it's going to look to course correct as they go against San Francisco. Despite the lack of playing time, Higgins, he does have 7 red zone targets, which is tied with receivers like Adam Thielen and Chris Olave. It is hard to determine if he's a buy or a sell, especially with Burrow battling through his injury, and lack of performance. And, this offense just has taken a step back. I still would look to buy low here. It seems that rib fracture, it should be nearing 100% here as we're coming off this buy. And I'm going to look to buy low here on Higgins. Now, moving on here, we're going to have a running back in Dameon Pierce. Now, Pierce, he has struggled this year, yet to have a 100-yard rushing game, and he does have 4 games below 40 yards rushing. Coming off this bye week, he's currently RB31. He missed the game, so he likely would be a little higher in those ranks, but maybe he's just hovering around a low end RB2. I would recommend selling. I'm just not sure who's going to be buying. You may need to wait until after this Carolina matchup this week. Carolina is a great matchup for fantasy running backs. They're a bottom 5 team or a top 5 team for a running back to face, but a bottom 5 defense. You get the point. Pierce has a nice stretch, upcoming week 11 to week 14, a good stretch. However, around this fantasy playoff times, week 15 through week 17, he's going to face Tennessee, Cleveland, and then Tennessee again. So, I would definitely kind of look to sell Pierce, but maybe you got to wait until after this game. Moving on, wide receiver DeVonta Smith. So A.J. Brown, he is absolutely taking control of this Philadelphia offense. Smith himself, he still has no less than 5 targets per game. However, he only has 2 games over 75 receiving yards. It's kind of hard to recommend buying Smith when he has consistently shown these modest performances. And when we look at Brown, 5 straight games over 125 yards. Yes, 5 straight games over 125 yards. Flip it over to their tight end, Dallas Goedert. He is kind of on a hot streak here. These last 3 games, he has at least 5 receptions. So with all that being said, this may be the right time to try and acquire Smith before any potential big game to give us that reminder. He is averaging 7.1 targets per game, but he is the PPR wide receiver 29. Buy low on Smith. Moving on here, we're going to get back to the running backs. Rachaad White. Now, with a bye week, he is currently RB24. Would say that's a little bit disappointing as there was high expectations coming into this season. Looking at White, he still only has 1 touchdown on the season. It's going to hold that advancement up those fantasy finishes. I would look to buy low here on White. Regardless of rushing ability, he's involved in the pass game. He's averaging 3.7 receptions per game. Now, this pass game involvement, it's going to make up for any lack of that rushing output. He recently has faced top defenses against running backs. That was Philadelphia, New Orleans, and Detroit. Yet, when we look at him, he is still playing majority of the snaps. He plays at least 70% in every game. Now, let's look at Bijan Robinson. Prior to last week, whatever happened there, he had 2 games below 70%. So 70% is pretty solid there for White. Look to buy low on that and get White on your team. Moving on here to another running back, Alexander Mattison. Now, he's coming off this tough San Francisco matchup, but yet Mattison only managed 42 scrimmage yards. It was a close game, and Minnesota, they had the lead to end the first quarter. Yet, Mattison only managed 8 total carries, while recently acquired Cam Akers, he managed 10 carries, and he had 61 scrimmage yards. This was the first game where Akers out-touched Mattison, but yet, Mattison, he did have a higher snap percentage. This is a unique situation where you could try to buy low on Mattison and kind of hope this was a fluke game, against a good team. But, I'm still going to get rid of Mattison or try to before Akers potentially takes over as the lead back here. It's been noted Akers has a little more pop than Mattison. So, I don't know. I would try to get rid of him before Akers has that lead back and Mattison just kind of goes down a lot. Carrying on here. Now, we are looking at another wide receiver 2 for his team, Jaylen Waddle. So look at Waddle. He's seeing a similar usage compared to that 2022 season. 6.9 targets per game in 2022. Currently has 6.8 targets per game. Unfortunately for fantasy production, his efficiency is not the same, which that should have been expected. We can't replicate that high of efficiency. So Waddle, he is wide receiver 34, but he has missed a game. So looking at those games played, he has over 10 points in all but 1 game. He is averaging 13 points per game. Garrett Wilson, he is at 13.5. Chris Godwin, 12.5. So he's in good company. I would like to buy low on Waddle. I mentioned this last week too. As mentioned, that usage is there. We just lost that efficiency. But I am hoping he's going to hit those home runs as the season progresses. This is why there's that little buy window. I mean, even if you want to call it that, as he just has yet to have a game over 100 yards. Yet averaging 5 receptions and 60 yards per game is a bad thing. Go ahead and buy low on that. That's still some solid production to have. Moving on here, a running back, Joe Mixon. Now, similar to White, he only has 1 touchdown on the season. Mixon, he's RB23 and is averaging 11.5 points per game. that's not too shabby. That's probably just not what was for the price paid. He should be considered a buy low, or he is what is happening could just be the running back Mixon is for this year. Looking at him a little more in depth, he has at least 3 receptions in 60% of games and is averaging 16 carries per game. Maybe chase that volume, but just this Cincinnati offense, it just has taken a step back this year. I would look to sell Mixon and try to find a more stable asset if anyone believes in this usage will eventually turn to that fantasy production. Closing out here with the 12th most traded player, Jonathan Taylor. Now, this last week, Taylor had a difficult matchup against Cleveland, and he came through against the doubters, which I'm kind of talking to a mirror here. That buy window is gone as he put up 120 yards and a touchdown. But it's still kind of interesting to see as Moss, he also had 18 carries. Zach Moss had 18 carries in this game. It does seem this offense, they're going to utilize those 2 running backs until, Richardson comes back. I still, obviously, buy Taylor, if you can, try to acquire him. Maybe the other manager, they have noticed Moss tied Taylor with 18 carries. Maybe, they're considering something's going on there. Regardless, we all know Taylor's one of the best running backs in the game. Each week, Taylor's role by expected fantasy points for the Colts has gone up. Simply put, just buy Taylor. Thank you for watching today's trade video as we broke down 12 of the most recently traded players for you. Thank you for watching and catch us next week, and subscribe and like to the channel here for more content.